The third sconce on the east corridor had been dying for a week, not dramatically, not the sudden guttering of something that had given up all at once, but slowly the way things die when no one is paying attention. A gradual dimming, a flicker at the wrong moment, the particular exhausted quality of a flame that had been asked to do too much for too long, and was beginning quietly to make its objections known. Briar had repaired it 3 times already, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and now Friday, at 3 in the morning, with 14 more sconces waiting, and the great hall chandelier ahead of her like a personal punishment. She stood in front of it with her oil can in one, hand in her trimming kit in the other, and addressed it directly. "I do not have time for you to be complicated." The sconce flickered. "Unbelievable," she said, and began the repair for the 3rd time that week. She was midway through it when she heard footsteps. Not the night watch. She knew those by rhythm and boredom. These were different, deliberate, unhurried. The footsteps of someone walking because they had chosen to, not because their route required it. She didn't look up. The footsteps stopped. "The 3rd one's been going out," said a voice, low, even. The kind of voice that filled rooms without trying. She looked up. The Alpha King of Mirafall stood 6 feet away, dark charcoal coat, hands clasped behind his back, watching the sconce she was repairing with the eyes of a man who had not, visibly, been sleeping. "How long have you known?" she said. "A week." She looked at him with the flat patience of someone selecting the most restrained response from a very large available inventory. "Go to sleep, Your Majesty," she said, and there was nothing mocking in it, nothing performed, just the flat, honest counsel of someone who had assessed the situation and arrived at a conclusion. She turned back to her work. He stood there a moment longer, then he walked away. She looked at the 4th sconce. "Not my problem," she told it, firmly. She was already wrong. He was there the next night, same corridor, same hour. Same dark charcoal coat and same hands clasped behind his back, and same expression that communicated with remarkable efficiency. Absolutely nothing about what was happening behind it. Briar saw him when she came around the corner, and she stopped walking for 1 full second. Not from surprise, exactly, but from the particular recalibration of someone whose internal filing system has just received information that doesn't fit the existing categories. She had filed last night under unusual. Not repeated. Irrelevant. She was going to need a new folder. She kept walking. "The 3rd sconce is holding," she said as she passed him. "I can see that." "Good. Make a note of what that looks like, because I've repaired it 3 times, and if it goes out again, I'm submitting a full replacement requisition to the stronghold stores. Someone will have to approve it." "I'll approve it. I know you'll approve it. I'm telling you in advance so you're not surprised by the paperwork." She moved to the 4th sconce, checked the reservoir, trimmed the wick with the brisk efficiency of someone running 14. Minutes behind on a 40-sconce rotation, he was still there. "Are you going to stand there, Your Majesty?" she said without looking up. "Or are you going to be kindly useful, please?" A pause. What would useful look like? "There's a secondary oil can in the left pocket of my kit bag. The Great Hall chandelier has 16 reservoirs, and I'm currently 11 minutes behind schedule because the 3rd sconce has trust issues. If you can carry the secondary can to the Great Halls and set it inside the service door, I will lose significantly less time on the stairwell." Silence. She looked up. He was looking at her with an expression she could not immediately categorize. Not offended, not amused, something that lived between those two things, and had not decided which direction it was going. "You're asking the Alpha King to carry your oil can," he said. "I'm asking the man standing in my corridor with nothing visibly wrong with his hands," Briar said, "to carry my oil can. The Alpha King part is between you and your dignity." Another silence. He crossed to her kit bag, found the secondary oil can, picked it up. He looked at it. He looked at her. Great Hall. Service door. Left side of the hall. Narrow door beside the tapestry of the 3rd Battle of Venmore. You can't miss it unless you've never been to your own Great Hall. "I've been to my Great Hall. Wonderful. Then this should be straightforward." He went. Briar watched him go, the broad line of his shoulders disappearing around the corridor corner with her secondary oil can, and stood for a moment with her trimming kit in her hand and the very specific expression of someone who has just done something and is not entirely sure how it happened. She went back to the fourth sconce. "Not my problem," she said. She was starting to say it the way people say things they are trying to convince themselves of. The sixth bell found her on the back stairs, not because the back stairs were on her route. Her route was finished, the ledger signed, the secondary can return to the service alcove, but because the back stairs were the only way to her, quarters from the east wing that didn't pass through the main corridor, and the main corridor at sixth bell was full of people beginning their day with the particular energy of the well-rested, which she found on most mornings professionally inadvisable to witness. She climbed slowly. This was the particular quality of her body at rotation's end, not collapsed, not dramatic, just the accumulated weight of 8 hours of stairs and ladders and oil cans making itself felt in her, knees and shoulders with the patient honesty of things that had been ignored all night, and were now presenting their invoice. Her quarters were on the third floor of the east residential wing, a single room, modest, with one narrow window that faced west and therefore received no morning sun, which she had selected, deliberately, and considered one of the better decisions of her adult life. The bed was narrow, the ceiling was stone. A small iron hook beside the door held her spare amber-brown coat, identical to the one she was currently wearing, purchased the same week, because if one coat was practical, then 2 coats was a system. She hung the working coat on the second hook, sat on the edge of the bed. The stronghold was waking up around her. She could hear it through the walls, the particular low-frequency shift of a large stone building changing registers, footsteps in the corridor outside picking up pace, a door opening somewhere below, the distant sound of the kitchen beginning its morning work, which she could identify by smell before she could identify it by sound. Bread and wood smoke, and something hot coming up through the old stones like a message. She pulled off her boots, set side by side at the foot of the bed with the automatic precision of someone who does the same thing every morning, and has stopped noticing they do it. On the table beside the bed, her personal lantern, small, brass-fitted, the glass slightly yellowed with age in a way that warmed the light rather than diminishing it. She kept it burning through her sleeping hours, had kept it burning every night for 2 years, through 3 postings and 2 sets of quarters, and one very confused senior keeper who had noted the oil expenditure and decided not to ask. She looked at it for a moment. "They're all on, Kale." She lay down without changing. She would deal with that when she woke. She always dealt with it when she woke. The particular negotiation of someone whose relationship with the conventional order of a day had been permanently rearranged and had made a functional peace with that fact. The stronghold continued to wake up around her. She closed her eyes. The man in the charcoal coat stood somewhere in the back of her mind with his hands clasped behind his back, and she told him firmly to wait until she had slept. He waited. She slept. He came back 11 minutes later. She was on the 7th sconce then, which meant she had made up the time, which she'd noted with the grim satisfaction of someone for whom logistical recovery is its own reward. "Done," he said. "Thank you." He fell into step beside her, not asking, not announcing, simply adjusting his pace to hers the way someone does when they have decided to accompany you and have not considered that this requires your input. She looked at him sideways. "Are you walking my rotation with me?" "I'm walking the east corridor." "My rotation includes the east corridor. Then we're going the same direction." Briar considered this for a moment. She moved to the 8th sconce. He stood slightly behind her left shoulder and watched her work with the attentive quiet of someone who is genuinely observing rather than simply waiting for something to do. Which was, she noted, despite herself, more than most people managed. His wolf had gone still beside him. Not the alert stillness of threat assessment. Something quieter than that, something that had simply stopped its usual restless movement and was paying attention. He did not examine this. He watched her check the reservoir. "You check the reservoir first," he said, "before the wick. Wick condition tells you what the burn has been doing. Reservoir level tells you how long you have. Reservoir first means you know whether you're solving a problem or preventing one." "They're different repairs?" Everything looks the same from the outside, Briar said. Doesn't mean it's the same problem. She moved to the 9th sconce. He moved with her. You're not going to ask me to leave, he said. It was not quite a question. You're the Alpha King. I can suggest I can't require. She checked the 9th reservoir. Also, you carried the can. So I'm approximately 30 seconds of goodwill into positive territory, and I'm trying to be a fair person. 30 seconds. Don't spend it all at once. The ghost, something moved through his expression again. There and gone like the flicker of a flame in a corridor draft. She moved to the 10th sconce. He followed. And that was how it started. Not with intention, not with decision, but with an oil can and a stubborn sconce and a man with insomnia and nowhere particular to be who had found. In the east corridor, at 3 a.m, the only person in Mirafall who would tell him where to put things and expect him to do it. The Thursday council session ran 2 hours longer than scheduled. This was not unusual. What was unusual was that Maldrick noticed it. The drag of the second hour in a way the first had not produced. A heaviness behind his eyes that he had learned to manage across 4 years of insufficient rest but had not today managed as cleanly as usual. He sat at the head of the long council table and listened to Councillor Edrath present the Eastern Boundary dispute. The same Eastern Boundary dispute that had been presented in various configurations for the past 3 sessions and kept his face exactly as it always was, still, attentive. The controlled composure of an Alpha King at a council table, which required a specific and ongoing expenditure of effort that no one in the room was aware of because he had become very skilled at making the expenditure invisible. Focus, he told himself. He focused. Edrath was saying something about the timber rights. The timber rights were adjacent to the grazing rights, which had been the previous session's dispute, which meant the Eastern Boundary was expanding its ambitions. The Eastern clan has historical claim to the ridge line, Edrath was saying, but current occupation would suggest. Current occupation is not legal precedent, Maldrick said. We're not settling this on the basis of who arrived most recently. Pull the original boundary documentation from the archive and we'll reconvene with actual evidence rather than recent history. A pause around the table. Edrath noted something in his ledger. The session moved on. His beta cress, broad-shouldered, reliable, possessed of the particular gift of reading a room without appearing to read it, caught his eye briefly from the left end of the table. Not a question, an observation, the look of someone who had been watching him for long enough to know the difference between a decision made from full capacity and a decision made from managed insufficiency, and who had discretion not to say so in a room full of council members. Maldrick returned his attention to the table. He was fine. He was always fine. After the session, he stood at the window of the council chamber and looked at Mirafall's outer courtyard below. The midday grey of it. People moving across the stones with the purposeful energy of people who had slept the night before and did not consider this remarkable. A pair of younger packmates crossing toward the training yard. A supply cart moving through the main gate. The ordinary daylight life of a stronghold running as it should. Cress appeared at his shoulder. The archive documentation for the Eastern Boundary, Cress said. It'll take the archivists 3 days to locate. Tell them to. Yes, Alpha. A pause. The careful pause of someone who has decided to say something and is selecting the delivery. You should eat something before the afternoon review. I ate this morning. You had tea this morning. I was there. Maldrick looked at the courtyard. I'll eat before the review, he said. Cress accepted this with the expression of someone who has learned that accepted is not the same as believed, and left. Maldrick stood at the window. The afternoon stretched ahead of him with its full complement of obligations. The review, the correspondence from the Western Territories, the weekly security assessment from the outer wall captain, and underneath all of it, running like a current beneath the day's surface, the knowledge that the 10th bell was still 9 hours away. He had not examined why he had started counting toward the 10th bell. He examined it briefly now, standing at the council chamber window, with the grey Mirafall afternoon pressing against the glass. Then he stopped examining it, because the afternoon review required his full attention, and the east corridor required nothing of him until 10, and he had learned across 4 years of governance that the most efficient thing a person could do was address what was in front of them and let the rest wait. The east corridor would wait. He went to eat something before the afternoon review. By the second week, she had stopped pretending to be surprised. He appeared at the third sconce, always the third sconces, because that was where her rotation started, and he had apparently memorized this fact without commenting on it. At the same hour, in the same coat, with the same expression of a man who had been awake since before she arrived and would be awake long after she finished. She was not a complicated person. She understood what she was looking at. The Alpha King of Mirafall was not sleeping. She had eyes. She had 3 years of walking the night corridors and knowing what people looked like at different stages of sleeplessness. The first night look, which was alert and slightly wired. The 3-night look, which was controlled but fraying at the edges. The week-long look, which was the particular flat competence of someone who had stopped feeling tired because tired requires a comparison point, and they had lost theirs. Maldrick had the week-long look. Had, she suspected, been carrying it considerably longer than a week. She did not say this on the second night, or the third. She was blunt, not reckless, and she had enough experience with guarded people to know that naming the thing too soon was the fastest way to make a guarded person disappear. She said it on the 5th night. "You look terrible," she said to the 12th sconce, in the same tone she used for maintenance observations. A pause. "Good morning to you too. I'm serious. You have the face of someone who hasn't slept properly in." She looked at him, assessing a notable length of time. "I sleep. When? At night. You are currently in my corridor at 3 in the morning on your 5th consecutive night of wandering the stronghold. At what point during the night does this sleeping occur?" His jaw tightened slightly. "It's not your concern." "You're right, Your Majesty," Briar said immediately. "It isn't." She moved to the 13th sconce. He followed. "Then why bring it up?" "Because I'm tired and my filter is thin and you walked into my line of sight," she said. "I've said worse to sconces. Don't flatter yourself." A silence that was, she noted without meaning to note it, not an offended silence. Something more complicated than offended. Something that was sitting with what she'd said rather than reacting to it. "Your filter," he said. "Is it always thin or?" "Night rotation," she said. 10th hour to 6th. 3 years. At this point, what you see is approximately 70% of what I actually think, and I consider that a success. What's the other 30%? Professionally inadvisable. He was quiet for a moment then. "How do you manage it?" "The hours. Poorly. Stubbornly. Willow root tea in the 4th hour when I start feeling genuinely unreasonable. Sheer bloody-mindedness the rest of the time." "You chose night rotation." "Yes. Why?" She moved to the 14th sconce. The question sat in the corridor behind her, patient, unhurried, not going anywhere. "Someone has to," she said finally. It was true. It was also not the whole truth. She filed the gap between those two things under professionally inadvisable and kept moving. He walked beside her. They did not speak again until the great hall chandelier, which required the ladder from the service alcove and both hands, and a level of concentration that didn't allow for conversation, which she appreciated, because concentration was one of the few reliable ways she had found to stop herself saying things she hadn't fully decided to say yet. He held the ladder. She had not asked him to. He simply saw it needed holding and held it. Without comment, without making a moment of it, with the same quiet practicality with which he'd carried the oil can on the first night. She was at the 3rd reservoir of 16 when she looked down and found him looking up, not checking on her progress, just looking, with those dark near-black eyes, carrying something she couldn't read from this angle or possibly from any angle. "What?" she said. "Nothing. You're staring at me. I'm ensuring the ladder is stable. You're looking at my face, not the ladder." A beat. "The ladder is stable," he said. She went back to the reservoir. "Go to sleep, Maldrick," she said to the chandelier. From below, quietly, "Working on it." She paused. It was such a small thing. 2 words. The admission of something that was not quite nothing. Not "I'm fine." Not "it's not your concern." But working on it, which was the language of someone who was aware of the problem and had not found solution and was, in the most limited possible sense, telling the truth about it. She finished the reservoir, moved to the fourth, did not say anything else, but something shifted in her chest. Small, inconvenient, entirely unwelcome, that she catalogued under not my problem, and stared at in the dark of her own mind with the expression of someone who knows the filing is wrong and does it anyway because the alternative requires more energy than she currently has. He said her name for the first time on the 9th night. Not as a summons, not with the deliberate weight of someone deploying a name as a tool, simply as the natural thing you say when you have been thinking about someone, and they have appeared in the space where the thought was. Briar. She was on the second sconce. The rotation started differently on nights when the outer ramparts required attention first, which rearranged the corridor sequence and meant she was running, the east wing in reverse, and she turned at the sound of it with the trimming kit already in her hand. He was at the far end of the corridor. She had passed Orin on the south stairwell 20 minutes earlier. Orin was the junior night keeper on the west rotation, 20 years old, reliable in the particular way of people who were new enough to the work to still find it meaningful, which Briar respected and occasionally found exhausting. He had been coming up as she was going down, oil can in hand, and had stopped on the stair with the expression of someone who had something to say and was calculating the odds. The west chandelier's left bracket is loose, he said. I checked it twice. Tighten the canopy screw first before you touch the bracket. The bracket looks loose, but it's usually the screw. I tried that. With the square head driver or the round. A pause. The round. There's a square head in the secondary kit. Left pocket behind the reservoir gauge. She kept moving. If it's still loose after that, tag it in the ledger and I'll look at it end of rotation. Right. He started back up the stair. Then, senior keeper. She looked back. He had the expression now of someone who had made a calculation and arrived at a decision that required some courage. The Alpha King, he said carefully. He's been on our rotation. He walks the corridors at night. He walks the east corridor specifically. Orin was looking at her with the careful diplomacy of a 20-year-old trying to say something without quite saying it. The other keepers have noticed. I wanted you to know they've noticed, and that nobody's said anything about it anywhere it doesn't belong. Briar looked at him for a moment. Use the squarehead driver, she said, and kept walking. Behind her on the stair, she heard him exhale with the relief of someone who has delivered a message and survived the delivery. She kept walking. The other keepers had noticed. She added this to the growing inventory of things she was not examining and kept it moving. He looked, she thought, worse than usual, not broken, not visibly struggling, just the particular hollowness that accumulated behind someone's eyes when they had been running on insufficient rest. Long enough that the running had become the only thing holding the structure up. She had seen it before. She had seen it in the mirror, in the 6 months after Kale, when she was keeping his lantern burning and managing his care, and telling herself that if she kept moving, nothing would catch up to her, right up until the night it did. And she had sat on the floor of his room with the lantern burning and understood that moving fast was not the same as moving forward. She recognized the look. She did not say that. You're at the wrong end of the corridor, she said instead. I'm running it backwards tonight. He walked toward her. Ramparts first? Outer torches were giving trouble, wind from the north. He fell into step beside her, the habit of it so established by 9 nights that it required no adjustment, just the automatic calibration of 2 people who had learned each other's pace without discussing it. They worked in silence through the 3rd sconce and the 4th. She repairing, he occasionally handing her tools with the quiet usefulness of someone who had paid enough attention to know what came next without being told. At the 5th sconce, she said without planning to. When did it start? He did not ask what she meant. That, she thought, was its own answer. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the sconce. He had not thought about when it started, had specifically avoided thinking about it. The way you avoid looking directly at something that might look back. 4 years ago, he said. The words arrived before he had fully decided to say them. She kept her hands on the sconce. What happened 4 years ago? A silence. the kind she had learned, across 9 nights, to read. Not the silence of someone who didn't want to answer, the silence of someone deciding how much of the answer they could afford to give. My father died, he said. And then there were things that needed doing. And then there were always things that needed doing. Yes. She lowered the trimming kit, looked at him. Not with the diagnostic assessment she usually deployed. Not with the careful professional distance she maintained round things that weren't her problem, but with something more, direct. The look of someone who is tired enough to stop performing detachment and honest enough to not pretend the performance is working. You never finished grieving, she said. His jaw tightened. I grieved. When? He stopped. The sconce burned between them. The night it happened, he said finally. I had an hour, before they needed me. 1 hour. It was sufficient. Briar looked at him with the expression she reserved for things that were obviously not fine and had just been described as fine. The flat, patient look of someone with a very thin filter and no remaining reserves for polite agreement. It wasn't sufficient, she said. Briar, 1 hour is not sufficient to grieve a person. 1 hour is barely sufficient to understand that they're gone. She picked up the trimming kit. I'm not saying that to be unkind. I'm saying it because you've been walking this stronghold every night for 4 years, and you look like a man carrying something with nowhere to put it down, and I have... She stopped, moved to the 6th sconce. You have what? He said behind her. She exhaled through her nose. Opinions, she said, professionally inadvisable ones. Ignore me. I've been trying, he said, and something in his voice was different. Quieter, with the particular texture of honesty that surfaces when someone is too tired for anything else. It's not working. She kept her hands on the 6th sconce. Her chest did the small, inconvenient thing it had been doing, with increasing frequency across 9 nights, and she told it, firmly and internally, to stop. It didn't stop. That's not sustainable, Your Majesty, she said quietly. Neither is this, he said. Briar, she stilled. It was the first time he had used her name. Not Keeper, not you. Just Briar, the way someone says a name when they have been thinking it for a while, and it has finally found its moment. She kept her hands on the sconce. A breath. 2. Go to sleep, Maldrick, she said. The words were the same as always. The tone had shifted. Something underneath the bluntness that was softer than she intended. He was quiet for a moment. He said. Not a deflection. Not a dismissal, I'll try. She moved to the 7th sconce, he moved with her. And somewhere in the east corridor, between the 6th and the 7th sconce on the 9th night of winter, Briar stopped filing things under Not My Problem, and started filing them under a different problem that I haven't named yet, which was dishonest but significantly more accurate. The end of her rotation on the 18th night found her alone. He had not come that evening. Some late council business, she assumed, or simply the stronghold requiring its alpha in the way it periodically did without consulting her schedule. She had done the full rotation herself. Kit bag over one shoulder, secondary can in her right hand, moving through the east corridor and the great hall and the outer torches with the methodical efficiency of someone who had done this for 3 years and did not require company to do it correctly. She told herself this on the 9th sconce. She told herself this again on the 14th. At the great hall chandelier she climbed the ladder alone and worked through all 16 reservoirs with the focused attention of someone who was absolutely not listening for footsteps in the service corridor below. She was not listening, she was doing her job. The chandelier was finished. She came down the ladder and stood in the empty great hall with the amber light from all 16 reservoirs blazing above her and her kit bag at her feet, and the particular quality of silence that lives in a large warm room when you are the only person in it. She stood in it for longer than she needed to. Then she picked up the kit bag and went back to work. She did not examine what the extra moment in the great hall had been about. She had a strong suspicion and she filed it under deal with that later and moved to the outer torches. The misunderstanding happened on the 19th night. She had been running late. The north stairwell had a torch bracket that had finally given up entirely and required an emergency replacement that took 40 minutes longer than it should have because the bracket was older than the current Alpha line. and had opinions about being replaced. And she arrived at the East Corridor 23 minutes behind schedule, which meant she was already a sister of tired that made her mouth operate slightly ahead of her judgment. He was waiting at the third sconce, which was, she noted, in the part of her brain that was still cataloguing things, the first time she had used the word waiting in relation to his presence in the corridor. And it was accurate, and she moved past the accuracy quickly because it had implications. "You're late," he said. "The north bracket finally died. I've been replacing it with a torch holder that was clearly installed by someone who had never met a wall." She set down her kit bag with slightly more force than necessary. "Before you say anything, yes, I know I'm behind. Yes, I'll catch up. No, I don't need help with the—" "I fixed the third sconce," he said. She stopped. Looked at the sconce. It was burning, steadily, evenly, with the uncomplicated reliability of something that had been correctly serviced. She looked at him. "You." The reservoir was low and the wick needed trimming, he said, with the careful tone of someone who is aware they may have overstepped and is presenting the information in the most neutral. "Register available." "I watched you do it enough times. It seemed straightforward. It is straightforward when you have the right tools. Your kit bag was in the service alcove. I used the trimming kit." She stared at him. The sconce burned steadily between them. "You went into my kit bag," she said. "The sconce needed. That is my professional equipment. My maintenance tools. You cannot simply—" She stopped, looked at the sconce, looked at him. The exhaustion and the lateness and the 23 minutes and the north bracket that had opinions all pressed against the back of her composure at once. "I don't need you to fix things. That's my rotation. Those are my sconces. I am doing my job and I do not need—" "I know," he said. "Then why?" "Because you were late," he said quietly. "And the sconce was going out, and you weren't here, and I—" He stopped. The corridor held the unfinished sentence. He looked at the sconce. His jaw was tight. Not with defensiveness, with something more complicated. Something that was pressing against the inside of his composure the way cold air pressed against old stone. "I didn't want you to come around that corner and find it dark," he said. The words landed differently than either of them expected. "Not, I was being useful. Not, it needed doing. But I didn't want you to find it dark," which was a sentence about her, about what she would feel, about him having thought about her before she arrived. Briar stood in the east corridor with her kit bag at her feet, and the correctly serviced third sconce burning between them, and felt something move through her chest that was considerably larger and more inconvenient than the small thing she had been managing for 19 nights. She looked at her sconce. "You trimmed it too short," she said, because she needed to say something and that was the safest available option. A pause. "By how much? 2 millimeters? Maybe 3. It'll burn out faster. I'll do better next time. There won't be a next time. This is my rotation." "Briar, don't." "I'm not. I know what you're not doing," she said, still looking at the sconce. "And I know what you are doing and I just need a moment to—" She picked up her kit bag. "Come on," she said, moving to the fourth sconce. "You can carry the secondary can since you've apparently decided you live here." He picked up the secondary can. She could feel him behind her left shoulder, the particular warmth of someone close in a cold corridor, as she moved through the east wing, and she kept her hands busy and her attention forward and told her chest with diminishing authority to behave itself. He walked beside her in silence for 2 full sconces. Then, quietly, not pushed, not asking for anything in return for what he had just said. "I know it's your rotation," he said. "I wasn't trying to take it from you. I just needed something to do while I waited." She kept her eyes on the 6th sconce, waited. He had said the word himself this time. Without moving past it, she did not point this out. "Tell me about him," he said, on the 7th sconce. "Quiet, not pushed," she stilled. Whoever you're keeping the lights on for." The trimming kit was very still in her hands. She had not told him about Kale. She had not told anyone at Mirafall about Kale. Not because it was secret, but because talking about him required setting him down in the open where other people could see him. And she had not been ready for that, had told herself she would never be ready for that. She looked at the sconce. "My brother," she said. "He was afraid of the dark." The corridor was very quiet. Was, Maldrick said softly. Not a question. Understanding the tense. 2 years ago, illness. She refueled the reservoir. I kept his lantern burning every night he was sick. Promised him the light would always be there. She closed the reservoir cap. He died on a Tuesday. I had the night rotation application in by Friday. She moved to the 8th sconce. He moved with her. He did not say, "I'm sorry." He did not say he sounds like he was important to you, or any of the careful, well-meaning things people said when they were handling a grief they had been handed unexpectedly. What he said was, "The lights stay on. Every night, every light, every one." A silence that breathed between them like something shared rather than something endured. He would have found that excessive, she said. Her voice had a different quality, not broken, not raw, just unguarded in a way she hadn't planned. Cale. He would have said I was being dramatic. Something moved across her mouth, not quite a smile, too complicated for that. He was the only person who could call me dramatic and not immediately regret it. Because he was right. Because he was annoying about it in a way that was somehow still endearing. She looked at the 8th sconce. He was 20. He had opinions about everything and was wrong about half of them and absolutely certain about all of them. He sounds exhausting. He was the best person I knew, she said simply. Maldrick was quiet then. My father used to walk the ramparts at dawn, every morning. He said it was for the view, but I think he just needed 20 minutes when no one could find him. She looked at him sideways. And now you walk the corridors at night. Someone has to check the sconces. She stared at him. He looked at the 8th sconce with an expression of complete composure. Did you just, she said, make a joke? I don't know what you mean, you did. You absolutely did. She pointed at him with the trimming kit. You made a joke, with your face doing almost nothing. That was genuinely alarming. You're overreacting. I am not. I have been walking this corridor with you for 19 nights, and I didn't know you could do that. I'm a man of hidden depths. Apparently. She went back to the sconce, but something had shifted. In her shoulders. A slight easing. The physical relief of someone who has set something heavy down briefly. Your father sounds like he understood something. He understood most things, Maldrick said. I didn't tell him that often enough. She lowered the trimming kit, looked at him, fully, without the professional distance she usually maintained, without filing anything. He knew, she said. You don't know that. People who are paid attention to know when they're being paid attention to. She picked up her kit bag. Even when it isn't said. She moved to the 9th sconce. He was quiet for a long time. Then he picked up the secondary oil can and followed her. And the east corridor held both their silences without distinguishing between them. And that was the night something between them stopped. Being a coincidence, and both of them knew it, and neither of them said so. She found him on the ramparts on the 26th night. Not in the corridor. She had arrived at the 3rd sconces at the usual hour, and found the east wing empty in a way that felt different from ordinary emptiness, and had continued her rotation with awareness of someone listening for a footstep that wasn't coming, which she recognized as a problem, and filed under deal with that later. She dealt with it at the end of her rotation, when, kit bag over her shoulder and secondary, can return to the service alcove. She took the north stairs to the upper ramparts because the outer torches required a final check before she could sign off and close her ledger. He was at the north wall. Cress had found him before she did, not on the ramparts. In the corridor below, 2 hours earlier, when Maldrick had passed him on the way to the north stairs, with the particular expression that Cress had learned, across 4 years of close proximity to readers do not ask me questions right now. He had fallen into step beside him anyway. This was part of his function and he had accepted it. Late, Cress said, matching his pace. Couldn't sleep. Again. Still. They walked in silence for a moment, the comfortable silence of two people who had learned each other across years of difficulty and had arrived at the understanding that companionship did not require constant conversation. The council noticed, Cress said carefully, that you've been present for the 6th bell briefings without being called. The 6th bell briefings are part of my schedule. They're part of your schedule when there's something requiring your attention. They've been noting your presence when there isn't. A pause. They've also noted that you've been present for the East Corridor third watch handover on several occasions.
I walk the corridors. You walk the East Corridor.
Cress kept his voice entirely neutral, which was its own kind of comment, specifically consistently between the 2nd and the 5th hour. Maldrick said nothing. I'm not raising it as a concern, Cress said. I'm raising it because you should know what the Council sees and what they're doing with what they see, which is currently speculating quietly among themselves. Edrath made a comment at the end of Thursday's session. I managed it. What did he say? Nothing worth repeating. I managed it. They had reached the north stairwell. Maldrick stopped, looked at Cress with the direct, undecorated attention that in 4 years had never failed to make council members uncomfortable, and had never once made Cress uncomfortable, because Cress had decided in the first week that the best policy was complete honesty, and had not deviated. The Night Keeper, Maldrick said. Briar, what does the staff say about her? Cress considered this with the careful precision he brought to questions that had more than one layer. That she is exceptionally good at her job, he said. That she keeps to herself, that she has never missed a rotation in 3 years. He paused. That Mira in the kitchens has been leaving her a plate on rotation night since her first week, which Mira does for no one else. Why? I asked Mira the same question once. Cress looked at the north stairwell. She said, some people come to a place carrying something heavy and never put it down because they don't know they're allowed to, she said. You can always tell which ones they are, because they're the ones who do their job perfectly and ask for nothing, and you have to watch them carefully, or they'll run themselves to nothing, without anyone noticing. The stairwell was quiet. Mira said that, Maldrick said. Word for word. I also have an excellent memory. Maldrick looked at the stairs. Go to bed, Cress. Yes, Alpha. He didn't move immediately. For what it's worth, you look better than you did a month ago. Not rested, but better. There's a difference. He left before Maldrick had to respond to that. Maldrick stood at the bottom of the north stairwell for a moment. Then he climbed. Hands on the stone, looking at the forest below. Dark, dense, permanent in the way that forests in winter are permanent. As though the cold has pressed them into something fixed. The sky above was the grey-black of deep winter, before dawn, without stars, without warmth, without the suggestion that morning was coming, even though it was. His wolf was restless. Had been restless since the 10th hour, pacing in the way it paced when the quiet in his chambers became a weight rather than a rest, when the grief his mind refused to hold during the day pressed in, from every corner of the dark. He had come to the ramparts to let it pace somewhere large enough to contain it. He had not expected her. She set her kit bag down, stood beside him. You missed the East Corridor, she said. I walked it earlier, without me. You weren't there yet. So you walked it alone and then came up here. She looked at the forest. How long have you been up here? A pause. 2 hours, Maldrick, the view is. It's 4 in the morning and there is no view, it's dark. You're looking at dark. She turned toward him. Not the professional assessment, not the diagnostic distance, just her. Looking at him directly with eyes that were too tired for anything but the truth. What happened? His jaw was tight. His hands on the stone were very still. I went to bed at 10, he said. First hour I've been in bed before, midnight in. He stopped. A long time. And the room was quiet. The words came out flat. Controlled. The control of someone pressing down on something that has pressure behind it. And quiet means, it's where everything I don't think about during the day is waiting. And I couldn't. You couldn't stay in it. No. She was quiet. The wind moved through the forest below, cold, indifferent. The same wind that had been moving through Mirafall's trees since before either of them existed, and would be moving through them long after. I do that too, she said. He looked at her. The rotation keeps me moving, she said. From the 10th hour to the 6th I have a purpose. 40 sconces, the great hall chandelier, the outer torches. Every hour has something that needs doing, and as long as something needs doing, I don't have to. She exhaled. Stop. And when the rotation ends, I sleep badly and start again the next night. He was looking at her with the full unmanaged weight of those dark eyes, not performing composure, not maintaining the careful distance of a man used to being the most powerful person in every room. just looking. The way you look at someone when you have stopped pretending you are not looking. That's not sustainable, he said. No, she agreed. It isn't. She looked at him steadily. Neither is this. His jaw tightened. I know, he said. You've known for 4 years. Knowing doesn't reach, she said. I know. I know it doesn't reach. The wind moved between them. I sleep better, he said very quietly. When I've walked with you first. She heard it. Felt it land. Not in her chest this time, but somewhere deeper. Somewhere that didn't have a filing system. Somewhere that received things without categorizing them first. Muldrick, I'm not, he exhaled. I'm not saying it to make it your problem. I know it's not your problem. You've made that very clear, and you're right, and I'm not asking you to. Will you stop? She said, talking for a moment. He stopped. She looked at the forest. When Cale was sick, she said, there were nights I sat outside his room because I couldn't be inside watching, and I couldn't be somewhere else not watching. So I just sat, in the corridor, close enough that if something changed I'd know. She felt the familiar press of 2 fingers moving toward her temple, and stopped them deliberately. My supervisor told me I needed to rest. My colleague told me I was running myself down. They were right. I knew they were right. But you stayed, every night. Because the alternative was being somewhere I couldn't feel him there. She turned to look at Maldrick. I understand walking the corridors because the room is too quiet. I'm not going to tell you to stop. He looked at her. What are you going to tell me? That you could also, she said, with the careful precision of someone choosing words like she chose wick lengths. Exactly right. No more, no less. Stop pretending. You're out here alone. The rampart was very still. The wind moved through the trees below. His hand lifted from the stone. Slowly, the way things move when they have been still for a long time, and the moving costs something. He reached up and his fingers rested lightly against her left temple, where her hand always went, where the pressure always lived, and just stayed there. Warm against the cold of the winter air, she went very still. You do this, he said softly. Every time something is difficult, she didn't move, couldn't quite. Habit. I know. His thumb moved, once, barely. What are you holding in place? Her breath came out unsteady in the cold air. Currently, she said. Several things. Something happened in his expression, the severe line of it shifting, the controlled composure but giving way to something underneath that was quieter and more real and considerably more dangerous to her equilibrium. Briar, he said, just her name. The weight of 1926ness, nights of East Corridor and oil cans and trimmed wicks and working on it, and I didn't want you to find it dark, all of it compressed into 2 syllables. Don't, she said. Say something that's going to make my rotation significantly more complicated. The rotation, he said, with the ghost of something warm in his voice, is already complicated. It was fine before you started appearing in it, was it? She looked at him. He looked at her. The winter dark held them both, and the wind moved through the forest below, and somewhere inside Mirafall's stronghold, 40 sconces, burned steadily through the night because she had checked every single one of them, and the great hall chandelier burned through all 16 reservoirs, and the outer torches held against the north wind, every light. No, she said, it wasn't. He slept on the 28th night. She found out because he told her, appearing at the 3rd sconce at the usual hour with something different in his face. Something she had not seen there before in 28 nights of East Corridor. Not relief exactly. Something quieter than relief and considerably more fragile, the expression of someone holding something new and not yet certain it will stay. I slept, he said. She stopped with the trimming kit halfway to the 3rd sconce. How long? 4 hours, maybe slightly more. She looked at him. 4 hours, she said. It's Maldrick. That's the most you've slept in 4 years. You don't know that. You told me on the 14th night that you hadn't had more than 2 consecutive hours since your father died. I have a very good memory for things people say when they think I'm focused on the sconces. His mouth moved, the almost expression that she had catalogued across 28 nights, the one that lived at the left corner and appeared when something had caught him off guard in a direction he hadn't prepared defenses for. You were focused on the sconces, he said. I was doing 2 things at once. It's night rotation. I always do 2 things at once. She went to the third sconce. He fell into his usual position at her left shoulder. His wolf had settled. That was the only word for it. Settled, the way it hadn't in 4 years, the way it had been restless and pacing and searching for something it could not name, and had, in the last 2 nights, simply stopped. He did not know what to do with the stillness. He stood at her left shoulder and let it be still. "It was after I came back from the ramparts," he said. "After the 26th night." She kept her hands on the sconce. "Good," she said. "You said stop pretending I was out here alone. I remember what I said. I went back to my chambers and the quiet was." He paused. "Still there, it's always there. But it was different. It wasn't waiting for me the same way." She lowered the trimming kit, turned to face him. Fully, directly, without the professional distance or the bluntness she used as armor, or any of the other things she deployed between herself and the things she hadn't decided to feel yet. "What was different about it?" she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "You were in it," he said simply. "Not, I don't mean that strangely. I mean the quiet had you in it. The things you said, the way you—" He stopped, looked at the sconce. "You're not going to make this easy," she said. "I don't know how. That's actually the most relatable thing you've ever said." The ghost became something more than a ghost. A real expression, brief and genuine and entirely unguarded, crossing his face with the quality of something that had been waiting a long time for permission to exist. "Briar," he said. "If you're about to say something," she said. "That will require me to have a feeling in the middle of my rotation. I need you to know that I have 11 more sconces and the Great Hall chandelier, and I am already running on 4 hours of sleep and diminished emotional infrastructure." "Diminished emotional infrastructure," he repeated. "It's a real condition. I'm sure it is." He took a step toward her, not closing the distance entirely, but reducing it, deliberately, with the patience of someone who has learned that some distances cannot be crossed all at once. "I'll wait until you've finished the chandelier." "That's," she blinked, "that's surprisingly reasonable. I'm a reasonable person." "You are not. You are an unreasonable person who appears in my corridor at 3 in the morning and fixes my sconces incorrectly and holds ladders without being asked and tells me things that require feelings at structurally inconvenient moments. The wick trimming has improved. By 1 millimeter. Progress." She stared at him. He looked back with the particular composure of a man who had just realized that composure and warmth were not in fact mutually exclusive, and was cautiously exploring the overlap. "Come on," she said, picking up her kit bag. "You can carry the secondary can. I always carry the secondary can. And yet you never complain about it. Would it help if I did?" "Immeasurably." He picked up the secondary can. They moved through the east corridor. The 10th sconce, the 11th, the 12th, in the easy silence that had built itself across 28 nights, without either of them laying the foundations, deliberately. The silence of 2 people who had learned each other's pace, who knew which problems were worth saying aloud and which ones could be carried quietly, and which ones occasionally needed someone to stand beside them and hold a ladder. At the Great Hall she set up the service ladder and began the chandelier. He held it. She was at the 7th reservoir when she looked down and found him looking up, the same as always. And she understood from this angle what the look contained. Not just attention, not just the careful watching of someone studying a new thing, something older and quieter and considerably more deliberate. "You've been doing this for weeks," she said, holding the ladder, looking at me like that. He did not look away. "Yes." She went back to the reservoir. Her hands were steady. She was proud of that. Her hands were steady, and her rotation was progressing, and she was fine. "Muldrick." "Yes." "When I come down from this ladder." "Yes. I am going to finish the rotation because I have 10 remaining sconces and the outer torches, and I have never not finished a rotation in 3 years, and I'm not starting tonight. I know." "And then," she said, to the 8th reservoir, "we can discuss whatever it is you are clearly waiting to discuss. All right. And I need you to know that whatever happens, I am still filing the 3rd sconce replacement requisition. Because it is structurally compromised regardless of what is happening between." She stopped. "People. Noted. Good." She finished the chandelier in focused silence, came down the ladder, picked up her kit bag. moved through the remaining 10 sconces with the methodical efficiency of 3 years of night rotation. Checking, trimming, refueling, noting, moving forward, he carried the secondary can. He handed her tools when she needed them. He said nothing. At the final outer torch, the last one, the north rampart, the one that required going outside in the cold which she had made peace with but did not enjoy, she refueled and trimmed and closed the reservoir and stood back and looked at it burning against the winter dark and took a full breath of cold air. Done. Every light in Mirafall, every corridor, every hall, every outer wall, burning, all of them. She felt, as she always felt at this moment, the small quiet thing that was not relief exactly, and not pride exactly, but something that lived in the space where a promise kept itself. Kale, they're all on. She closed her ledger, turned. Maldrick was standing at the rampart wall, not looking at the forest this time, looking at her, with the full, unmanaged, undefended weight of a man who has stopped running long enough to understand where he has arrived. She crossed to him. The space between them was not large. She closed it. Not dramatically, not in a rush, not with the accumulated pressure of 28 nights releasing all at once. Just a step, and then another, until she was close enough that the cold air between them was shared air, warm enough from proximity to feel different from the winter around it. She looked up at him. "You have something to say," she said. "You've been not saying it for 11 sconces and a chandelier. That's considerable restraint." "I've been practicing," he said softly. "How'd it go?" "Poorly. I kept thinking of better ways to say it." "Pick one." He looked at her, at the dark, honest eyes that said more than she intended, and the mouth that said everything she intended, and the small old scar at her left temple, and the oil stain on her left cuff, and the amber-brown coat she wore every night in the cold because someone had to keep the lights on. And she had decided, 3 years ago, and, for reasons she was only now beginning to let herself understand, that it would be her. "The corridors were mine," he said. "For 4 years, every night. Mine. And then you were in one and they became somewhere I was going instead of somewhere I was leaving." She was very still. "I haven't been going," he said. "I've been leaving. For 4 years I've been leaving. The chambers, the quiet, the grief, everything that was waiting in the dark. And now You're going somewhere," she said. "Here," he said. "Specifically here." Her chest did the thing it had been doing for 28 nights. The inconvenient, unwelcome, entirely undeniable thing that she had filed under every available alternative, label and run out of alternatives for. "I kept telling myself," she said, "that it wasn't my problem." "I know. I heard you. I said it to the sconces. You say a lot of things to the sconces. They're good listeners, they don't." She stopped. "They don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm." She looked at him. "Like I'm someone worth crossing a corridor for." Something moved through his face, through the jaw and the eyes and the severe, beautiful lines of him, like warmth moves through cold stone, slowly, completely, changing the temperature of everything it reached. His hand came up, her temple, the same place as the ramparts, warm against the winter air, gentle with the particular gentleness of someone who is being careful with something they understand the value of. "You told me," he said quietly, "to stop pretending I was out here alone. I did. I'm telling you the same thing." She looked at him for a long moment. "Then I'm going to keep the rotation. I know. All of it every night. Every sconce. I know. And you are going to stop trimming wicks when I'm not here because you consistently take 2 millimeters too much, and it shortens the burn time. And I have enough to manage without." "Briar," he said. "Yes, I know," she exhaled, just slightly, just enough, and rested her forehead against his jaw. Not a dramatic gesture, not a declaration, just the small, exhausted, genuine action of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time, and has found in the most unlikely place. A cold rampart, a winter night, a man who couldn't sleep and kept appearing in her corridor, that she is allowed to put some of the weight down. His arm came around her, slowly, carefully, the way you hold something you understand the value of. They stood at the north rampart of Mirafall in the dark before dawn, the forest wood below, the winter above, the stronghold warm and lit behind them, and neither of them said anything, and neither of them needed to, and somewhere in the east corridor, the blaster sconce burned steadily because she had fixed it properly and it would hold until morning. Every light on, all of them. Epilogue. The third sconce went out on a Wednesday. Briar discovered it at the start of her rotation, came around the corner at the 10th hour with her kit bag and her secondary oil can and her ledger, and found the east corridor one light short of its full complement, the third position dark and entirely unrepentant about it. She set down her kit bag, looked at it. "We've been through this," she said. The dark sconce offered nothing in response. She was midway through the repair. Reservoir refueled, wick examined, the particular stubbornness of the bracket requiring the small auxiliary tool from the left pocket of her kit, which she had to set the trimming kit down to reach when she heard footsteps. Familiar ones. She did not look up. "It's out again," Maldrick said, from somewhere behind her left shoulder. Observant. "I thought you submitted the replacement requisition." "I did. Stores approved it. The replacement bracket is on order from the Eastern Supply Depot." She located the auxiliary tool. "It will arrive in approximately 3 weeks, at which point this specific bracket and I will be permanently parting ways, and I will feel nothing. Nothing? Professionally appropriate closure." He was quiet for a moment. She heard him set something down on the windowsill. A soft sound, ceramic on stone. "Willow root," he said. "4th hour blend. Mirror in the kitchens showed me the ratio." She stopped with the auxiliary tool in her hand, looked at the windowsill. A covered clay mug, steam rising from the small gap at the lid's edge, thin and pale in the cold corridor air. She looked at it for a moment with the expression of someone receiving something they had not prepared an appropriate response for. "You went to the kitchens," she said. "The kitchens are in my stronghold. At the 10th hour, Myra keeps late hours, Maldrick." "The ratio," he said with complete composure, "is apparently 2 parts willow root to 1 part dried. Ginger and a small amount of something she wouldn't specify but said would help with the 4th hour low. I wrote it down." She stared at him a moment longer. "You wrote it down, on a small card. It's in my coat. You have a recipe card in your coat." It seemed practical. Briar looked at the ceiling briefly in the manner of someone requesting patience from an authority higher than herself, received no visible response and looked back at him. "What is Mira like?" she said. "At the 10th hour." Something crossed his face, the almost expression warmer than usual. "Suspicious," he said. "Initially." She wanted to know why the Alpha King needed to know the 4th hour blend ratio, and whether someone was unwell. "What did you tell her?" "That someone had been managing on insufficient rest for 3 years, and the standard blend wasn't cutting it, and I had been informed by a reliable source that the 4th hour low was a real and documented phenomenon." Briar was quiet for a moment. "A reliable source," she said. Her words after that were, he paused. She said, and I'm quoting directly, "About time someone in this stronghold paid attention to that girl. She runs herself to nothing every single night and smiles at nobody about it." The corridor was very still. "She said that," Briar said, verbatim. "I wrote that down too." "You did not. Different card." She looked at him, at the complete composure of his face, and the warmth that lived just underneath it, and felt something move through her. That was not the small, inconvenient chess thing she had been cataloguing for 28 nights. Something quieter than that. Something that didn't require filing. "Mira has worked the kitchens since before I arrived," she said finally. "She leaves a covered plate on the kitchen windowsills on rotation nights. I thought it was policy." "It's not policy," he said. "How long has she been doing it?" 3 years, he said. "Since your first week." Briar looked at the sconce. People had been paying attention. Mira with her covered plates. Maldrick with his recipe card, and his secondary oil can, and his ladder holding. The third watch guards with their name for his circuit. The stronghold, in its way, had been watching out for both of them. 2 people, too, practiced at managing alone to notice they were being managed around. She filed this under deal with that feeling later, and then, because she was tired, and her filter was thin, and she was 42 nights into whatever this was, she didn't file it at all. She just let it be true. She stared at him. He looked at the sconce. "You're losing the bracket angle," he said. She looked back at the sconce, readjusted the auxiliary tool, finished the repair with the focused efficiency of someone whose hands know the work well enough to continue it, while the rest of her is doing something else entirely. The sconce lit steady, even, adequately trimmed. She had taken exactly the right amount of wick, not 2 millimeters too many, the correct amount, burning with the uncomplicated reliability of something that had been properly cared for. She picked up the clay mug. It was warm through her hands, the warmth of something prepared recently by someone who had thought about the timing. She lifted the lid. The willow root rose with the ginger underneath it, and the unspecified something from Mira's private stores that smelled faintly of dried citrus and something sweet. She took a sip. "It's better than mine," she said. "I'll tell Mira." "Don't, she'll be insufferable." She took another sip. "How did you sleep?" 5 hours. She looked at him sideways. Something moved across his face. Quiet, unheld, the expression of a man who has stopped being surprised by good things and started, cautiously, expecting them. 5, she said, and a half, possibly. "You're keeping track." "I count everything," he said. "It's a problem." She looked at the mug at the third sconce, burning steadily. At the east corridor, stretching ahead of them with its 14 remaining sconces and the great hall chandelier and the outer torches and the full rotation, spread out across the next 8 hours like a map of everywhere she was going. "Come on then," she said, picking up her kit bag. "You can carry the secondary can." "I always carry the secondary can." He picked up the secondary can. She moved to the fourth sconce. He fell into step at her left shoulder. The exact right distance, the learned distance. Close enough that the cold between them was shared air, and far enough that she could work without adjustment. She checked the fourth reservoir. He handed her the trimming kit before she reached for it. She took it without comment. The east corridor stretched before them. Warm amber light at intervals, deep shadow between. The old stone holding the cold and the sconces pushing it back. Every one of them burning because she walked through every night and made sure of it. All the lights on, all of them. If this story kept you company in the quiet hours, the sleepless ones, the ones you fill with movement because stopping asks too much, then you already know what lives here. More are coming. Subscribe so the next one finds you, with gratitude always.